Hello and welcome to Horror Rewind. This is Kelly Florence, and with me today is my guest co-host, Bob Florence. Bob, do you want to say hi to the people?
Yes, I'd like to say hi to everybody, and true confessions, I am Kelly's father-in-law.
Yes, and you are calling in from lovely, sunny Phoenix, Arizona today. Well, outside of Phoenix, but we had the pleasure of visiting you. It wasn't the sort of visit that the kids have in this movie, thankfully. It was a much more lovely visit recently.
It would be hard to replicate a visit like in the movie. So I hope I'm not quite as scary as Pop Pop.
Now, this is a funny thing that I made sure to take note of is that, Pop Pop is the grandpa in the movie, and our kids call you Popper. You were originally Pop, but then you became Popper after the Mr. Popper's Penguins movie starring Jim Carrey. So how do you feel about that transition from your name?
I don't mind Popper. I do sometimes object when the kids are upset with me to call me Pooper, which, ironically enough, fits into this story nicely, as you'll learn. I'm a little disquieted by the Pop Pop and how close it is to my name, because I hope I'm not this type of scary grandpa.
No, you're definitely not.
My dad and my grandfather in Oklahoma were both named Pop.
Okay.
But not Pop Pop.
Right. Now, this granddaughter in the movie is creating this documentary, and in order to warm the grandma up on camera, she asks Nana what animal would she like to be if she could be any animal. So, just to stick with the movie theme, I'm going to ask you to warm up. What animal would you be if you could be any animal?
I think I'd like to be an indoor cat. That's well cared for, such as our Sammy is cared for.
I think that is truly the best answer, and I think I agree. After spending a few days seeing that cat laying in the sun and just living it up, what better life could there be?
No, it's about the best life any cat, so I hope I'll come back as a cat at some point in the future.
Okay, so we are talking about The Visit today. M. Night Shyamalan wrote and directed this movie. It came out in 2015. It has a 67% on Rotten Tomatoes. It had a budget of only $5 million. Found footage movies tend to be low budget, and it made $98.5 million at the box office. Did you see this in the theater when it came out?
I don't think so. I saw it long ago on my TV. I'm very fortunate. I also looked at it a few nights ago and caught some of the nuances in the movie that I had missed. Just to preface things, I will have to mention something unrelated. My daughter Beth had just done a wonderful podcast with you, and I spoke with her 2 days ago, and she told me that when I do podcasts, I'm too boring and I'm too serious, and I need to act like I'm having more fun. So all I ask of you, Kelly, is if at any point I seem to be that way, please say to me, just please have fun.
Okay, I will do.
Okay?
Sounds good. Now, something fun about this movie is that it's actually featured in our new book that just came out, The Science of Women in Horror. We have three chapters in our section on this trope of the Gorgon, which is scary old women. And I can't think of anybody scarier than this grandma. I mean, she seems so fine, but it turns scary very quickly. How did you feel about her in particular?
I agree. She was not a very well-known actress, Deanna Dunnigan. She actually was 74 years old when this was filmed, and she did an excellent job of acting like a horrible grandmother and remembering her lines. I don't think I could remember lines at that age, and I'm close. If they did a seminar, by the way, Kelly, on how to act creepy when you're old, I think these two people should lead the seminar.
Oh, they were just perfect.
Yeah, and I looked her up on the internet. She looks much better in real life than she looked in the movie.
Right. Yeah, much more glamorous, yes, out and about. And an interesting thing, just the casting in this movie I thought was just spot on. Catherine Hahn, she was on Parks and Rec, which we both enjoy. She was the mother, and it's this perfect setup because she hasn't spoken to her parents in 15 years. They've been estranged. And so this is the first time the grandkids will be meeting their grandparents. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the movie, these are not their grandparents. And what a perfect setup. They don't know what they look like. They don't know what to expect. So, of course, they would go in thinking everything's going to be fine.
I agree. And Catherine Hahn in the movie came across as what I call a rather flippant mother. I thought she wasn't attending to details of her kids. She was more focused on her new boyfriend and going on a cruise and dumping the kids somewhere to enjoy the cruise. I didn't really like the way she came across, but I know it's acting. I should also mention that I was very taken with Stacy, who had a very small part.
Oh, yeah.
Stacy, I just find her to be very attractive. She was 37 years old at the time. And I found out that she got a Tony Award for playing Scout Finch in the play To Kill a Mockingbird. So she's a pretty heavy hitter, although she had a very small part.
Yes, and poor Stacy, when she's hanging in the yard at the end, it's just tragic, and she's so earnest. It's so it's so sad. Now, do you remember the first time that you sent your kids for a sleepover at their grandparents, or somewhere else? And did you send them off on, like, sight unseen, like this mother did?
Well, I knew where they were going, and I didn't have to show them pictures.
Right.
Although maybe in the future I will, to be sure they're with the right people. And then as soon as they arrive, I would like to have the grandparents, Skype with me to make sure they're who I think they are.
Right.
So I will take further precautions in the future.
Now, these kids take an Amtrak to visit their grandparents, and I know you are a fan of the Amtrak. Do you have any recent Amtrak travels?
You mean horror stories?
Oh, yeah, basically.
Not real recent. I like to go to Chicago. I love the Amtrak. It's part of the experience to be mistreated.
Oh.
And the Amtrak, as long as you expect that. But I did notice the train looked like an Amtrak train, and then later I saw the label that it indeed was my favorite form of transportation.
It is lovely, and if it was only more reliable, but maybe it's getting better now that construction has been completed, or is construction always in season?
Well, construction in North Dakota finally, the spur was finally built, so it's no longer the 8 hour delay that we've experienced in the past.
I see. There's the grandson, we find out now while he's on the Amtrak that he's sort of germophobic. Did you ever treat any germaphobes in your years as a physician?
I honestly can say that I really haven't. At least they didn't reveal that to me. My uncle, Francis, was quite germophobic.
Oh.
So it runs in the family, although I don't find that to be a case with me or anybody else.
Now, did he avoid shaking hands and things like that, or?
He liked to tap elbows.
Okay.
Which was very endearing to me.
Aw.
I use that in church when I have a cold, by the way, also.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, it's very, very hygienic.
Now, when they get to the grandparents' house, they tell them, don't go in the basement because there's mold in there, and conveniently, they don't have any cell phone reception. So these are just great things that are being set up in the plot so that, well, those things are probably true, so why would we even worry?
Well, and also they gave them a curfew of 9:30 to not come out of their room after 9:30 at night, although even on the first or second night they violated the curfew and ventured out.
Right.
To their chagrin. I would say one thing. I read some of the comments on the internet about the movie, and as you might expect, some were wonderful and some were terrible. But one wag said something that was very disrespectful. He said, I would rather rearrange a stranger's spice rack than watch this movie.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, that was a low blow for me. So you'll see everything from soup to nuts on the reviews, but that one really caught my eye.
Now, I know you were saying that when you saw that this movie is classified as horror comedy, that you're put off by comedy within your horror. But on this most recent rewatch, did you appreciate like the grandson saying names of pop stars instead of swearing and some of his quips, or did you feel like it was out of place?
Well, as you know, you feel that I'm a little weird since I don't like humor and horror, and I was concerned. I would classify this as a horror movie, not as a comedy.
Yeah.
And I did get a kick out of his rapping, what I could even understand of it. And the fact that they were doing a documentary was just kind of funny in and of itself.
Right.
And also his way to avoid swearing was some of the names he came up with interesting. But I will have to say that as the horror ramped up gradually, the comedy ramped down. And the last maybe half an hour of the movie, which is quite horrible, there was no comedy.
Exactly.
Which was wonderful.
You know, I read that M. Night Shyamalan said the first cut of the movie that he did, you know, his edit, it seemed more like art house horror, and he ended up editing back in more of the humor because he felt like it took itself too seriously in his first edit. And so I think that, you know, he did strike the right tone with having the humor more in the beginning and sprinkled throughout, and then by the end it is all horrific.
Yeah, so I didn't object to it the way it was handled, actually.
Yeah, well, that's good.
And I would say one thing, he was on Jimmy Fallon one time, which was interesting. And he made a comment, and I'll quote this. He said, "The devil lives amongst us. No need to invoke the supernatural to make a movie scary." That's probably true. I think things in real life, in many ways, can be scarier because they actually occur than something that's trumped up, as something supernatural. And it was interesting. There's a lot of horrible things that go on in life, and he just depicted something that could actually happen.
Right. Oh, and to, you know, have these innocent children who have no way out, no one to help them be the victims in this. It's just, it gets all of us. You know, I like how our first scary moment is scary, but it's not anything totally out of the norm. It's just the grandma vomiting at the bottom of the stairs. And I mean, it's a scary moment and it catches us off guard, but you know, that could happen.
Well, Pop said that she just had the stomach flu. I like movies that start out normal. For example, when they arrived at the train station, the grandparents had made a banner for them welcoming them.
Yes.
I don't recall when I just picked you up at the airport, I had a banner for you, for
right.
example. But I thought that was very touching. So it starts out very normal. And I had written down a few subtle hints that you try to ignore that this can be normal, but the more hints that occur, they kind of build up. For example, even in the car from the train station, there was absolutely no conversation.
Right.
Which I thought was weird. And then when they arrived at the house, Becca and Tyler went to the swing, and she told him to let the swing sway organically. And this happened twice, and there was no wind at the time. So I thought there was a little scary about the swing swinging spontaneously. Then on day 2, when Pop was by the shed, Tyler said hi. He did not respond and just walked behind the shed.
Right.
And then telling them never to go in the basement due to mold, you could pass that off, or curfew at 9:30. These things can all be passed off, but if you put them together, these are subtle hints that this is not a normal situation.
Right. Oh, and it's building up. And then the first truly terrifying moment when you know that something is not right is when they're playing hide and seek under the house. And that grandma is doing this crawl/gallop, and her hair is down, and it's just so wrong.
Well, and that really struck me because I had several chills throughout the movie. That was one of my chill factor. And isn't hide and seek supposed to be funny?
Yeah, exactly.
Is it supposed to be fun? Maybe I'm missing something here. But it was kind of in the mud under the barn or something, and the crawling and the sounds, it was very scary. And the disparity between what hide and seek should be and what it was just dramatic.
Oh, I love that scene and just the fear that it builds, and just it's so off. You're speaking of the hints that are being given. A nice little subtle hint. You mentioned Stacy. There's another guy that pops in just to check on the grandparents, and of course they're out for a walk or something. But oh, they were supposed to show up and they didn't come. And it's like, wait a minute, these people, they haven't been there for a while. And then Stacy, I think, says, have they heard about all the hubbub going on down at the center? And no, they haven't. But of course, it's that these people escaped and they're nowhere to be found. But really, they're there. It's just so. It's really good writing.
That was definitely a hint, but although rather subtle, you could pass all these things off. And if you hadn't seen the movie, you could pass all these initial ones off as maybe just normal behavior. But when it comes down to the vomiting, could be explained away. But why wasn't she vomiting in the toilet instead of running all over the house vomiting?
Right.
And then the other thing, at night when they saw her from behind, she had no underpants on.
Right.
And then one time she was actually totally naked, scratching on a door.
Yes.
And then crawling around. So these are not subtle. These are getting to be more dramatic hints that are starting to scare the kids. And Tyler finding a pile of dirty diapers in the shed was another not so subtle hint of something's amok.
Oh, and speaking of that night, the second night when she's scraping and scratching at the door, and the next day it's explained away by saying that she's suffering from sundowning. And we expand on it in our book, but do you ever have any patients that you had to treat for sleepwalking or strange behavior after night?
It's fairly common, especially when older people are hospitalized, and especially if they may have an incipient dementia. When the sun goes down, they can act pretty crazy during the night. And it's a big problem, especially when you get these people out of their environment. And sundowning is fairly common, and it's different than sleepwalking. I should mention also that the proposed name of this movie originally was going to be Sundowning, and they switched it to The Visit, which I think I like The Visit better.
Yeah,
because
me too.
It sounds so normal.
Right.
Like, oh, we're having a visit. That's wonderful. And one of the other hints, this isn't even a subtle hint, but when she keeps wanting Becca to go inside the oven to clean it.
Yes.
That was the first time she didn't close the door, but the second time she did. And first of all, I'm not sure how many ovens would accommodate a 15-year-old person. It's a very large oven. And when she did close the door, I was so afraid she was going to turn it on, but she didn't. And then also one time Nana made a statement to her, and she said, "I have the deep darkies."
Oh, yeah.
That doesn't sound very good.
No, that's so scary.
Yeah.
Now, I was wondering, I grew up and I knew all of my grandparents because I lived close to them. But I know my parents, they knew their grandparents, but none of them spoke English because they had all immigrated to the United States. Did you know your grandparents? Personally, did you have visits to your grandparents when you were growing up?
I did to my grandparents in Chicago. They would babysit for Cookie and I at times. My grandmother, my dad's mother, died at age 37 in a car accident in Ohio, so obviously I never met her. And Pop Florence down in Oklahoma, I think I met him twice, but he was not a real doting grandfather, so I had very little contact with him. So it would be mainly my mother's parents who lived in Chicago.
Okay. I think it's interesting how, I feel like the role of grandparents and relationships of how, now my kids know their grandparents versus even how much like I, played with my grandparents. It's just changed. And I feel like grandparents are more hands-on, or maybe, we're just all younger, or I don't know. What do you think it is?
I think things have changed. Grandparents now are going to all these games we never used to go to, and they're taking children on vacations. They're having them visit when they go to Arizona, those types of things. So everything has changed in terms of, and grandparents used to be kind of old people that were sitting in a chair with a blanket over their lap, and we don't see that anymore.
Right.
So things have really changed a lot. By the way, you haven't said I'm not having fun yet. Am I being looser than last time?
I think we're having a great time.
Okay, if you sense I'm getting too boring, tell me.
I will. Now, something I like about the writing that I noticed too is that M. Night Shyamalan throws in a couple of red herrings, because we know from his past movies like Signs or The Sixth Sense, like you said, there could be some supernatural things going on, but really there isn't. But a couple of the red herrings, Nana talks about the alien pond and how, you put the kids in and then they're going to bring you to this other planet. And then Pop is talking about when he worked in this factory and he saw this thing running around with the white eyes. And so we're wondering, wait a minute, are they really aliens? Have they been taken over? Is there some sort of creature? But really, they're just out of their minds.
They really most likely have schizophrenia with maybe in her case, Nana's case, is a little dose of early dementia going on and paranoia. So, yeah, I did notice that. I didn't know quite what to make of it, but it just kind of contributed to their, what I call, weirdness.
Right. When I saw this movie in the theater, I saw it on opening night, and it was a packed, sold-out theater. And the moment, people were reacting throughout, but the moment that people actually jumped out of their seats and screamed was when they set up that hidden camera, and then Nana walks by, and you think she's leaving, but then she pops up and growls at the camera and grabs it. And then she brings it with, and she's got that knife, and she goes up to the kid's bedroom. And people were just freaking out audibly and physically in the theater, and I will never forget that. It was so shocking.
And I agree with you, because of the 7 or so chills I had during this movie, that was one of the biggest one. Literally from my head down to my toes, I got a chill when her face appeared, and she was so scary and growling right on the screen. It was a very chilling moment for me.
Yes. Oh, so good. Now the big reveal, we still don't know, but the big reveal is finally when they get the camera cleaned off of the computer, which Nana had conveniently tried to clean, quote unquote, but really blocked. And right. Catherine Hahn says, "Those aren't your grandparents." It is such a gut punch. And all of a sudden, the fear that you must feel when your kids are with these strangers and what is going on.
I just can't imagine it. And of the 7 chills I had during this movie, I will have to say that was number 1. Ugh. And I was talking to my daughter Beth about that 2 days ago, and she thinks that's one of the most horrible moments. It's not really a jump scare. It's right. Different. It's just like horrible realization that these kids are in danger. And that one, to me, is one of the most horrible things I've ever seen in a horror movie.
Oh, definitely. Now, they try and then at this moment to play it cool, and they're going to play the board games with the grandparents and try to act natural. Pop, of course, loses his bowels at the table at one point. Now, I know the Florence family is notorious for peeing a little when they laugh too hard, but is there any Florence family bowel stories?
Well, we don't talk about them.
Okay.
We like to talk about the urinary incontinence with laughing. But, yeah, the poopy diapers. And, by the way, can I say the word poop, or should I use the word colonic, bionic slurry?
No.
What would you prefer?
Poopy is perfect.
I don't know if this is a family podcast or not. I will say one thing, and this is a sign of, I think, my maturity. There was at one point, since I had subtitles on, I didn't hear it, but they said that Pop burped and then farted. I don't know if you caught that or not, but it's the first time in my life, and this is wonderful, that I've ever thought a fart wasn't funny.
Oh, well, yes. You know what? That is saying a lot.
Either the horror completely overwhelmed the fart, or I'm maturing. One of the two.
Maybe a combination, yes.
But anyway, it was in the subtitle, believe it or not, and I didn't hear it, but the subtitle said burp and fart. So.
Oh, yes. God, that moment. And Tyler is staying there with the grandparents to try to distract them, while Becca goes to investigate if the grandparents could possibly still be alive in the basement. And the grandma is just getting weirder and weirder. And Becca finds the bodies and the bloody hammer and the photos of her real grandparents. What a nightmare.
that was another chilling moment, and it was quite horrible. I was kind of wondering how long those bodies had been there, and if they didn't form a stench in the house. But
Right.
that was another chilling moment when she realized that they had actually killed these people. And the other thing that on Friday night, I kept thinking, let's get over with this and let them get out of here. But it was Friday now. And then Pop says, let's have a perfect family night. And I thought, wow, this is the antithesis of a perfect night. It looks like he's trying to kill them. And there's nothing perfect about it. And then playing Yahtzee seems so weird since there was so much tension. And then they're supposed to play a board game.
Right.
And then he's getting mad about the dice and everything. It was just, they tried to be normal, but they weren't normal.
Yes. Now, this climax of the movie, this has to be in my top 10 of most horrifying scenes ever. Becca is trapped in the bedroom with the grandma, and the light is out, and so we're only seeing through her point of view shot through her viewfinder of the grandma crawling around and being totally creepy. And then poor Tyler is being tortured by his grandpa in quotation marks, with the poopy diaper, and he's germophobic. He's just paralyzed with fear. Did this climax with these two scenes strike you as much as it did me?
Oh, it certainly did, and I can't imagine this thing with the poopy diaper in his face, although he later did do a rap song about it, which was funny, but later after the movie was over. But he was also being victimized by Pop in a psychological way, because he said something to me that was very chilling. All of a sudden he said to him, "You do know that I don't like you."
Oh.
Imagine hearing that when he's already being creepy.
Right.
And then he says, I don't like you. I thought, oh my gosh, that is so horrible to even hear a grandfather. Well, he wasn't a grandfather, but to say to somebody. It was just awful. And then the way they both killed them was horrifying.
Yes. Something that I realized earlier when they're doing their little monologues to the camera, Tyler reveals about how he feels like maybe their parents got divorced because he wasn't a good enough football player. And then he is able to redeem himself because he uses that football tackle to tackle the guy at the end. And I thought that was nice. It gave him some feeling of getting over that past trauma. And I can't imagine the therapy that they're going to have to go through after this experience, though.
And, I'm a little disappointed that you bring this up, because I was hoping that I could have scooped you on this one.
Oh, sorry.
That I should have known that you would pick it up, because I thought it was very interesting. He, in essence, was blaming the divorce in some regards on him freezing and not tackling that player who scored a touchdown.
Right.
And it's common for children to blame themselves for divorces, and it was irrational. But in his mind, his missing the tackle could have contributed to the divorce. And he did redeem himself and vindicate himself when he tackled Pop. And if you recall, when he was approaching him, he was actually describing how to do the perfect tackle.
Right.
As he was taught in high school football. And eventually, I've never seen anyone killed by crushing their head in a refrigerator door before. That's a first.
Oh, yeah.
He must have slammed it 20 times on his head.
Oh, gosh.
But I've never heard of anyone dying in a refrigerator door before.
Right.
But I thought that was pretty interesting about the tackle. And don't feel bad that you brought it up, because I really was hoping to have you say, man, you really picked up something I didn't notice.
Yeah.
So.
I'll edit it in later. Just kidding.
Okay. You can edit that out as much.
Now, I appreciate the little afterword. They're safe, and then we get this confession cam of Catherine Hahn at the end explaining the actual falling out that she had with her parents. And I appreciate that, because otherwise it's this mystery that's hanging over the entire movie of, what actually happened. And it was horrific. She hit her mom, and then her dad hit her. But I also liked how she explained that forgiveness was there the whole time, and she just never went to get it because she was too stubborn. And so I thought it was just a nice reminder that we should appreciate our families, and even if we do have problems, it's maybe worth trying to work out.
I agree. That was a touching scene towards the end when the horror was really over, and Becca was actually trying to comfort her mother about the divorce and the 15-year schism from her parents. But then her mom said something to Becca, which I thought was very interesting, and it's something we can all appreciate, is she said, don't hold on to your anger.
Yes.
She held on to it for 15 years, and she didn't want Becca to do the same thing. She said, don't hold on to anger. So there are some lessons in this movie.
Yeah.
I have to admit that was a nice lesson at the end.
Now, I don't remember if I asked you this the last time you were on the podcast, but what was the first scary movie that you saw? Do you remember?
Well, it was probably the classics. They used to have scary movies every Friday night when I was a kid. I went to my friend's house and we watched the movies. But the typical ones of Boris Karloff and Dracula and the Wolfman and Frankenstein, the classical old ones are the ones. And it was called Shock Theater. That was the name of the show. And it was great memories of watching horror movies with my friend every Friday night, or most Friday nights.
Oh, that's cool. I love that. I was going to ask what scares you, but you said maybe the thing earlier is that the true stuff, the stuff that could happen. Is that, do you think, scarier to you than fictional monsters?
I think it is, because it's real life and it could actually happen. And there were some jump scares in this movie, which made me chill a little bit. But I think the scarier ones were not the jump scares. They were the things that happened more gradually or that just shocked me.
Right.
And I think those, to me, are more effective than jump scares, which you can throw in any movie with music and slamming doors and things like that.
Yes, I agree. Now, we need to rank this movie on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 being you hated it, 10 being it's a perfect movie. I was thinking for scale that we could use poopy diapers, but I'm going to let you choose since you're the guest.
Well, it's interesting. I was talking to my daughter Beth about that 2 days ago, and I first said that I would like to count how many chills, but then she pointed out to me appropriately that it's supposed to be something in the movie. So I immediately jumped on poopy diapers.
Yes.
So we're on the same page with that. Now, are we winding up the podcast now? How are we doing on time?
Yep. No, we are winding up. So
Okay. All right. So I would give this a 8 poopy diapers.
I think that's a great rating. I think, when I said the Rotten Tomatoes, it was only 67%. I think that was low. Maybe I'm biased because I love this movie so much. I'm giving it 10 poopy diapers out of 10 because I think the pacing, the tone, the fear and dread, and the actual things that it makes me feel scared wise, it's beyond measure. I remember coming home after seeing this movie and the lights were out in the house, and I pictured Nana standing over me with her claw hand in the air like she is after they're done playing Yahtzee. And that is such a terrifying image, and it's so subtle. So I'm giving it 10 poopy diapers.
You're giving it a 10. Well, I'm not going to change my rating.
No, that's fine.
Maybe it's because the comedy still got to me a little bit.
Yeah.
I will say one of the funniest things, and maybe crass at the end, which you can edit out if you wish, but when he was doing the rap song at the end, and I couldn't understand many of the words, and the subtitles had gone away, but he did mention that he had a poopy diaper in his face for a half an hour.
Yes.
Which was not exactly true. But the other thing, and edit this out, please, but he finally found out there's something that doesn't taste like chicken.
Oh.
And I thought, oh my God, that is so horrible. So feel free to edit that out. It's so gross.
Oh no, it's a good line, and I don't even know. I wouldn't want to think about it. But
let's not even think about
that.
Yeah,
it's again true horror. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on Horror Rewind again, and let me know the next time you want to talk about a scary movie.
Well, I'm glad you had me back because after my first performance, I was afraid you'd never ask me.
No.
So thank you for asking me, and I hope I was a little bit more animated and fun this time than last time, and I hope you will have me back at some point.
Of course. So until next time, we'll see you in the horror section.
Yep. Bye-bye from Pop.
From Pop Pop.
Pop Up.